In the Farbrengen of this afternoon, there were several inyonim which are related l'maise, l'rois l'poyel. We will review them first before we go in to a synopsis of the Sichas. The Rebbe spoke in regard to what the Alter Rebbe writes in Kunteres Achroin, where the Alter Rebbe brings out that we should make a chalukas hashas, we should divide the shas every year. And everybody should participate in such a division. And this leads to it that the entire group, all participants together, finish the entire shas. Whether it is all the 60 Masechtes, or as the Zohar says, there are 63 Masechtes. This is Mishnayos. Gemara, there are 36 Masechtes of Gemara. And the Rebbe brought out that it was a custom by Chassidim always to do this Chalukas Hashas. Sometimes it would be done on the Farbrengen of Yutas Kislev, sometimes it would be done on a different occasion. But actually the Rebbe Zilgezinzen was the one that instituted that it should be on Yutas Kislev. This happened many, many years ago, back in the early 1950s. Prior to that, it used to be Chavdalet Tevis, the day of the Yotzet of the Alter Rebbe. The advantage of participating in a Chalukas Hashas is, just like we find in Halacha, we find in Hilchos Shabbos, there's a concept that Shnayim she'asuha pturin. When two people together do a malacha, they are patur. It doesn't mean that they are permitted to go ahead and do it, but they are exempt from any type of punishment. When does this rule apply? Only if each one of them could have done the malacha on his own, and now the two of them did it together. However, in the case where, for example, it's a type of malacha which one person cannot do on his own, and it can only be accomplished when two people do it together, then this rule of Shnayim she'asua pturim, that two have done it, they are exempt, does not exist, and both of them are chayiv, both of them are, whether it was b'shegeg, they will both have to bring a korban. If it was b'mezed, they both deserve the equal punishment, and so forth. And the Rebbe compared this to a Chalukas Hashas. Chalukas Hashas, it is hard on every one of us to complete the entire Shas in 1 year. However, when we participate, all of us together, then it is considered as if every participant has completed the entire Shas. Furthermore, we say in davening every day, before we begin Haidu, we conclude the Sheyabana Beis HaMikdash, give us our part in your Torah. What does it mean, our part? How do we know what our part is? Because every Yid has his share in Torah. We do not know what it is. But when we participate in a Siyam HaShas, and we are credited in a Chalukas Hashas, in the division of Shas, and we learn our Masechta, and we are credited as if we would have learned the entire Shas, so we automatically have our share in Torah as well. Here the Rebbe mentioned, same thing we have, even yet stronger, when we learn Rambam. Because when we learn Rambam, we cover the entire Torah, as the Rambam himself writes in his introduction to the Sefer, that by learning Rambam, being that the Rambam covers all aspects of Torah, all subjects of Torah, so when one learns Rambam, especially when we learn 3 Prokim a day, or even 1 Perek a day, we cover all in Yonim of Torah. A comparison to this, the Rebbe brought from the Gemara, where the Gemara brings how one Amoira said, or Tana I think, said to the other, Ovuch b'may havezohir tvei. Tell me, in what mitzvah was your father careful in most? What did he really excel in? In other words, we're talking about a person that was mekayim all mitzvahs. But nonetheless, there was a certain mitzvah which he had a special gishmak in, a special taste, a special joy. And as Chassidus teaches, Zohir doesn't only mean what mitzvah was he careful in. It means what mitzvah was illuminated by him. Because when one has a real specific geschmack, a specific taste in the mitzvah, this mitzvah is illuminating by him. And the same is regarding Torah. Every Yid has his share in Torah, his special chelik in Torah. And by participating in a Chalukas HaShas, we automatically cover our share in Torah as well. And therefore the Rebbe urged that in those places where a Chalukas HaShas was not made yet, to have it done, and everybody should participate in this Chalukas HaShas, as we just brought out, the special advantages of participating in such a thing. Another issue which the Rebbe brought to our attention was that we can still make Chassidische Farbrengens for Yutes Kislev. Because originally, when the Alter Rebbe was released from prison, and he left Petersburg on his way home to Lozhne, it wasn't until Chanukah that he arrived home. And that is when he really got back to himself, got back to his own home. When was that? In Chanukah. So the final stage of the redemption was in Chanukah. Therefore, until then, we can still organize Chassidische Farbrengens that should be related to Yutes Kislev. Another inyan which the Rebbe brought to our attention is Shiurim of Chitas. Shiurim of Chitas, because now on Yutes Kislev we begin the Tanya, which we will end with Hashem next year, the day before Yutes Kislev. And Tanya is something which has a major shaykhs, a major relation to Hafatzas HaMayonos, to the spreading of the wellsprings of Chassidus. And when did Hafatzas HaMayonos really begin? That began after the Alter Rebbe was released from prison. And here the Rebbe referred to the fact that Thursday night the Rebbe distributed the Tanyas. The Rebbe said that he asked that on the Tanya it should be written how many years it is since when we began celebrating Yutes Kislev, and it is 192 years. 192 in Hebrew can be written as Kovatz Kuf Beis Sadik, which equals 192. It could also be written as Kotzav, which is also the same numeric total of 192. And the Rebbe brought out that it is Kovatz. Everything was accumulated already. All in Yonim were accumulated, and we are ready for the coming of Mashiach. Because the whole idea of the Tanya is spreading the Mayonis of Chassidus. As Mashiach told to the Baal Shem Tov, that is when Mashiach will come. And Tanya is the teachings of based on the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. As we find right away in the Haskama on the Tanya. There are two Haskamas on Tanya, from two colleagues of the Alter Rebbe. One from the Rebbe Reb Zusha of Anyipola, and the other one from Rabbi Yehuda Leib HaKohen. Rabbi Yehuda Leib HaKohen uses the expression, Uke'eis, Yismach Yisrael. Now rejoice, Yisrael, when all of these great things are being revealed. So Yisrael, you'll notice in the Tanya, it's printed in bigger letters, the word Yisrael, because this refers to Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, that the Tanya is based on the teaching of Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, the teachings of Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, Yafutzu Ma'anesecha Chutza, are being revealed through the Tanya. And now we have accumulated all of these in Yonim already, and therefore it's Kotzav. It is a set time. Kotzav Miloshin Kates. It's set time for the coming of Mashiach. And that this year should be a year of Gul. Now we will go over a little bit of the Sichas. The Rebbe brought out that Bichlal Shabbos relates to the week that has passed, in the sense that everything that has transpired throughout the entire week has its elevation and becomes whole and complete once we reach Shabbos. And Shabbos also has the fact that Shabbos minei mizbalchin kulu yoymen, as the expression in the Zohar is. Shabbos gives bracha into the entire week. And when Shabbos gives bracha to the entire week, it's not just for the following week, because from this following week we come into a Friday, which that Friday we prepare for a Shabbos, and we go again into a week. So actually from every Shabbos, from this Shabbos, we are getting bracha for an unlimited amount of time. In the week itself, the week is divided, that the first half of the week has a specific relationship to the previous Shabbos, as opposed to the latter part of the week, which relates to the forthcoming Shabbos. And that is also reflected in Halacha. And Halacha, if one did not hear Havdalah, or did not make Havdalah, Motzei Shabbos, he can be Yetzer Havdalah until Tuesday. So from this we derive that Tuesday relates still to up to Tuesday, it still relates to the previous week. However, as of Wednesday, it has a shaykhas to the forthcoming week, and that is why And the Yom which we recite on Wednesday, we already say the small Lechuna Ranana. Lechuna Ranana is a Friday night prayer. However, we say a small Lechuna Ranana, that means we're already beginning to prepare for Shabbos as of Wednesday. Especially that Yutas Kislev was on Thursday. And it is also known that the minig by the Rabbeim was, the custom was, that the major Farbrengen of Yutas Kislev was on the night from Yutas Techav, because the Alter Rebbe was not finally redeemed, finally released until very late in the day of Yutas. So when do we celebrate it? The Oyer L'Chav. And Chav was already Friday. And from this Friday we entered straight into the Shabbos. So this is the Shabbos that really has a shaykhus to Yutas Kislev, to the Chag HaGeula of Yutas Kislev. And this is also reflected in Parshas HaShavua. The Parsha begins with Vayeshev Yankov B'Vayeshev. And Rashi comments, the famous Rashi, Bikesh Yankov Leishev B'Shalva. Vayeshev is an expression of a peaceful relaxation. Yaakov wanted to sit back peacefully. However, he ran into the problem with Yosef. Says the Rebbe, being that we know that Retzoin Yerei of Yaseh, the Rebbe fulfills the wish of those that fear him. And when we're talking about a person like Yaakov, who was the B'chir Sheba'ovis, the most chosen one amongst our others, so we must say that the Rebbe fulfilled his wish. And his wish was what? Leishev b'shalva, to have shalva, relaxation and peace. So we must say it was fulfilled. How was it fulfilled? So we begin learning right after this pasuk. We learn about Yosef. What was Yosef? What is the taich of Yosef? Hoysafa, to increase, to be moisef. The mere fact when we are moisef, when we add on an inyanim of kedusha, this in itself creates a position of shalva, a position of peace and relaxation. Furthermore, what is the whole inyan of Yosef? The whole inyan of Yosef is, as we learned when Yosef was named, Yosef Hashem li bein acher. The whole idea of Yosef is that from the one that was considered an acher, an outsider until now, the avodah of Yosef is that we reach out to him, and he is turned into a bein lahakadosh baruch hu, a son of Hashem. When such avodah, which in Chassidish terminology this is called the avodah of his hapcha, we turn over, we convert. Until now he was an acher, and now he's a bein la Hashem. Such avodah causes shalva. And this is reflected right here in the pasuk. The pasuk says, how old was Yosef? Yosef was ben shva esrei shana. He was 17 years old. What is 17? 17 equals toiv, equals good. So right away we find in the pasuk that there was an inyan of shalva, an inyan of good. This avodah of ishapcha, this is the entire idea of Yutas Kislev. The Alter Rebbe was in Masa, the Alter Rebbe was in prison, and it was converted to an inyan of Geula. And especially this year, that this is the year of Tehei Shnas Arenu Niflois. So it's more than last year. Last year was Tehei Shnas Nisim. Nisim we can have miracles, however the miracles will remain concealed. As the expression goes, Ein Bal Hanes, Makir B'Nisei. At times we can live through miracles and we wouldn't even realize that there was a miracle. However, when we're talking about Arenu Niflois means we're talking about such wonders that we will see them, we will have access to them. Tangible wonders. And that is what we're expecting this year. And what is the main pella that we're all waiting for? We're all waiting for the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu. And this is reflected in the famous episode of the Rebbe Maharash and his father, the Tzemach Tzedek. The year Tafrei Ches was known, it was brought in Sforim, that is a year of a kates. In other words, it was a set time for the coming of Mashiach. So the Rebbe Maharash once went into his father, the Tzemach Tzedek, and said, Tafrei Ches is a year of a kates, and Mashiach did not come. So he told him, Tzemach Tzedek responded, this is the year that the Lekutei Torah was printed, and it was a tremendous revelation in Pnimiyus HaTorah, which is a taste of what Pnimis HaTorah is a taste of Torah Shel Mashiach. So to the Tzemach Tzedek, he was already satisfied with this tremendous revelation. However, the Rebbe Marash told him, no, this is not sufficient. We need Mashiach B'Poyel. Because the Rebbe Marash, whose entire Avodah is reflected in the famous concept of L'Katchila HaRibah. And L'Katchila HaRibah, we need it should be Ishapcha. Ishapcha means we should be totally converted from what it is now. Now we are in Golus, we need Geulah. And the Rebbe Marash, whose name was Shmuel, Reb Shmuel, this relates to the first Shmuel, to Shmuel Hanavi, who was given that name by his mother Chana. And Chana abbreviates the three major mitzvahs that the house of Israel relies on, exists on. Chana, the Ches stands for Chala, which basically refers to Kashrus. Nun is Nida, the mitzvah of Taras HaMishpacha. And then we come to the Hey, which is Adlokas HaNeah, the Inyan of Shabbos. What is the Inyan of Taras HaMishpacha? Taras HaMishpacha accomplishes that whatever was not pure until now, was an undesirable way, now it becomes pure. Tahara. This is again the same concept, the Avodah of Ishapcha. This is also reflected in the Mizmor Tilim, which we say every day. The Gemara tells us about the greatness of saying Tehillah LeDavid, which is Ashrei, 3 times a day. And we say it Taki even before Shemona Esrei, the first time. And there, as the Gemara says, there are psukim that begin with every letter of the Aleph Beis, but not with the letter Nun. Because Nun relates to Nefila, to falling. There's no concept of falling. We go right away to Samach. What is Samach? Soimech Hashem l'chol ha'neitlim, that the Rebishter upholds all those that fall. And in Yinav Ishapcha. And from the Inyan of Geulah, is also reflected in the further Sedras, in the Sedra which we began to read today to Mincha, which begins Vayhi Miketz Shnosayim Yomim. It was after 2 years. So the Rebbe teached Vayhi Miketz Shnosayim Yomim. It's after the 2 Batei Mikdash, and after the 2 Batei Mikdash, we still have it in a position of a dream. What is the Inyan of a dream? Golus. Golus is compared to a dream. But after the 2 Batei Mikdash, we will come to the 3rd Beis HaMikdash, which will be a permanent Inyan of Geulah. This is also reflected in the pasuk Yichayenu miyomayim. By Yom HaShlishi, Yomayim refers to the 2 days. Which 2 days? The first 2 Batei Mikdash. However, by Yom HaShlishi, the 3rd one, the 3rd day, Yikimenu, we will stand firm, v'nichya, and we will live lefanav. And what type of a life? A life of shehechiyanu v'kimanu v'giyanu lezman hazeh. A life that can be seen and identified as a chassidish life. The Rebbe also referred, talking about the Inyan of Geulah, the Rebbe also referred to the Sfarim that should be coming forth from Russia, obviously. And there we have Svarim, that are Svarim and manuscripts handwritten by the Rabbeim themselves, or things which were copied and rewritten from the handwritings of the Rabbeim, as well as their objects that belong to the Rabbeim, and other things which were part of their property. And all of this should come through in a way without any tsar and agmas nefesh. It should come through in a smooth way, and a successful way. And the Rebbe also continued on another which we have in this week's Sedra. In this week's Sedra we learn about the children of Yehuda that were born, Zorach and Peretz. And first the Torah tells us about the birth of Zorach, but it's an incomplete birth. He just stuck out his hand, and something was tied around his hand. Then we learn about the birth of Peretz, and then we come back to Zorach. And the Rebbe touched it up. What does Zorach mean? Zorach means Maloshen Zricha, Maloshen shining. And what is Paratz? Maloshen Ufaratz, to spread out. And all of this really refers to levels of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. First we begin on the level of Zorach, Zricha. We begin to shine. However, it is incomplete. A hand is stuck out. And remember that a hand by a child is something of great importance. All the feel that a child does which causes a lot of satisfaction to the child, comes through his hand. However, at the same time, he's still incomplete. After the level of zarach comes paretz, comes an inyan of uparatzta. We go out of our limitations, out of all our medidos v'hagbalos, and once we were successful in the avodah of paretz, then we get back to zarach again. However, here it is a complete birth of zarach, which means a complete level of shining, of zericha. Here the Rebbe concluded this leads us also into Chanukah, where by Chanukah, the mitzvah of Chanukah is al Pesach beisay mebachutz. The Chanukah candles are, as the Gemara tells us, belong on the outside of, right on the door which comes to the outside of the house. What does this indicate in Ruchnius? That our houses have to be such that immediately from the outside of the house it should be noticeable that this is a Yiddish house and this is a Chassidish house. It's a proper type of a house, and it should be even noticeable al Pesach beisay mibachutz, from the outside of the house. And from all of this, going through Chumash Bereishis, we come finally to Chumash Shemais, and Shemais begins ve'elu Shemais b'nei Yisrael abayim Mitzrayim, going on the names of the Yidden that came to Mitzrayim, Reuven, Shimon, and so forth. And the Medrash tells us, Reuven v'Shimon Nachse, and Reuven v'Shimon Salki. They went down as a Reuven v'Shimon, they went into Golas, they entered Golas as Reuven v'Shimon, and they came out with the same names as the same Reuven v'Shimon. And just like it was in Golas Mitzrayim, all of the Golas now compared to Golas Mitzrayim. And the same way we will immediately come out of Golas, Reuven v'Shimon Nachse, and Reuven v'Shimon Salke, and will be put an end to the Golas, and from Golas it will become Geula. And the difference between Golas and Geula is that Geula has the Aleph, Golas doesn't. Aleph refers to Aluf Yishalaylam, the master of the world, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And once the Aleph is instilled, then it becomes an union of Geula, which will come through Mashiach Tzidkenu, taking all of us to Eretz Yisrael. A gute Woche, and a freilichen Chanukah.